I grew up on the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in the 1950s, during a time when there was still a lot of traditional families. And many of those traditional families spoke Lakota. And many of the elderly members of those families had stories to tell, especially in the wintertime or at some social gathering. Invariably, when people got together, some elderly person would call the children together and tell stories about culture, about history, about ancestors.
Lakota legends, how oral storytelling communicates one nation's legacy. The Lakota oral storytelling tradition has been used to preserve history, culture, and beliefs through generations of families in South Dakota. My favorite legend is a story called Punishment Lake. As the story goes, there was once a young girl named Weewonk, who was in love with a warrior named Black Bear. Weewonk's father wanted her to marry Whitetail, a 60-year-old chief. The two ran away, encouraged by love. They were captured by Whitetail and set for a dishonorable death. Weewonk was chained up on the tallest hill to the east of the lake. Black Bear was chained on the tallest hill to the west. This hill was later called Salvation Hill, located north of Florence. My favorite legend is a story called Punishment. Stories have to be told or they die. We cannot remember who we are or why we're here. Stories have to be told or they die. We cannot remember who we are.
Why don't we write down our history?
We have always had a lot of people who were speakers and leaders that told stories and gave us our history through the spoken word. We hear stories over and over again to help us to understand why things come to be or why things happen the way they are now. So all of our history, it's very, very important to be listening to our elders so that the stories they tell us, we can hold on to and then pass on to our children.
Communication is used to inform, express feelings, imagine, and influence. Telling legends for centuries have accommodated all of those reasons. Lakota people use their way of telling myths to inform the younger generation as to lead them to have a safe life. They want their past remembered in all truth and accountability, to have fun telling stories about great power and impossible feats of strength, inspiring young minds to try their best. People like Joseph M. Marshall III want to tell their stories and the stories of their ancestors. He uses his book, The Lakota Way.
There were very few radios when I was a boy, and of course no televisions, and Lakota was the predominant language. Stories were entertainment and education, and they were the mechanism by which the Lakota culture perpetuated itself. The storytellers in my childhood were the grandmothers and grandfathers who had lived life and learned a thing or two from living and from stories.
The Legend of White Buffalo Calf Woman. The Legend of White Buffalo Calf Woman. This legend tells us a story about two young men that went out hunting. A woman appeared in front of them. One of the men had desired to be with the woman. He turned into nothing but bones. She approached the second, more respectful hunter and told him to go back to the village and to wait for her arrival. When she approached the village, she gave a wrapped bundle carrying a sacred pipe and gifted them with many ways to pray. She then gifted them their spiritual beliefs and ceremonies. The Legend of White Buffalo Calf Woman. This legend tells us a story about two young men that went out hunting. A woman appeared in front of them. One of the men had desired to be with the woman.
Still worked because that discovery of the artifacts just affirmed what our ancestors have been telling all these years. So oral history is important. I mean, it should still be important part of the process, and it should be start with the family, saying, okay, this is who we are as your parents, and this is who your grandparents are on both sides. It doesn't matter how you feel about them or whatever. This is who we are. This is where we came from. Who's in control? It's that simple. Who gets to write the books? Who gets to tell the stories now? That's called our history. And I think a good example is something that happened up at the Little Bighorn battlefield in 1983, 1984. Up to that point, the white historians had a strong tendency to go along with or discount some of the oral stories that our side told about how the battle progressed and how it came, how it ended, the famous last stand. Available, but it still worked because that discovery of the artifacts just affirmed what our ancestors have been telling all these years. So oral history is important. I mean, it should still be important part of the process, and it should be start with the family, saying, okay, this is who we are as your parents, and this is who your grandparents are on both sides.
The South Dakota Reservation, Sisseton-Wahpeton, has a unique shape, to say the least. Most people think that the triangle shape represents a teepee, but it has a longer history. It all starts with Lake Kempeska in nowadays Watertown. A U.S. general met with a Lakota chief to decide land arrangements. The Lakota chief stood on the north shore of Lake Kempeska, raising his hands high up, forming a V that would represent where he wanted his tribe to live. The U.S. Army agreed, and they made a treaty. The Army tricked them. Their land stopped at the South Dakota border when the chief's plans were to extend land all the way into Canada. This lie would contain the tribe into a small reservation, hoping to take most of their culture with it. The use of telling legends help Lakota stories to be remembered. The use of telling legends help Lakota stories to be remembered.
Ni te ota unipi. Na wicho chaga ota unipi. Na hecho oyate ki na ku trokata kia niuk upik te na ulakota na lakolu yam nish lakho woicha ke nish hena hecha na yinkte.